what is the real actual reason why I'm here today? Well, what triggered everything for me is that I've seen so many things in medical technology, and I kind of was tired of seeing the same mistakes repeated so many times by startups that end up failing. So with this in mind, I said, well, now I will write a book about failures and how to avoid them. And that's what I did. The book is coming out at the end of March, beginning of April. It's called De-Risking Investments in Medical Technology Innovation, published by Springer Nature. And so it took many years to put it together. And so I'd like to share some of the learnings I had in medical technology and some of the processes that I believe can minimize the chances of failure. So today, after this brief introduction, I'd like to talk about why medical innovation is difficult. You probably know, but let's refresh it. Why medical startup fail, and how we can minimize the failure rate. Now, why do I think that this is? Okay, you see, I was young once in my life. This is when I went on Forbes. I was in Poland, and Baxter grew like 200% 2 years in a row. So I was good when I was young. Like, that's what this slide wants to tell. I'm sorry, and this is the book. See? By the way, in terms of slides for today, if you want later on, you can go online and find, I will show you this QR code. You can find the slides that we use today, so you can download them. A note for students. I will talk about why medical technology sometimes fails, but the reason of me talking to students today is that I want you to start to grab the business mind that you will encounter when you will meet your next employer, okay? The fact that you are good engineers is given for granted. And so when I've interviewed biomedical engineers in my past life, I wasn't even wondering if they were good or not. I was trying to understand if they had a business sense or not, if they knew what they were coming to do or not. So what I encourage you to do is not being very interested maybe in the theory that I will show you, but in the language, because this is the language that your next employer wants to hear from you, okay? There is another little piece. The process we have found out, wasn't me alone, of course, is very good for researchers because it's able to tell researcher in advance if the research they're doing are only very good academically, or if there is a way that research can change the life of people, which means that the research is able to generate money enough to exist. So why medical innovation is so difficult? Well, it is so difficult for 4 major reasons. One is well known. It requires discipline clinical economic proof, which requires a lot of capital at the beginning. So when our credibility is at the least, we need a lot of capital to prove our clinical claims. Second, it has a high social impact, which is an honor, of course, but it is a responsibility. Today, medical technology is looked at like the major driver for the increasing cost of healthcare. So there is an implicit emotional barrier when we go in the market, because we are seeing immediately like those who want more money from a system that is already spending, between brackets, too much. The third reason is that there are significant legal liability implications, and some of us know exactly what it means, having to do with patients and with their life. And then there are a fourth one, which includes all the complexities and the uncertainties around medical innovation. They come from the fact that it is a global business. They come from the fact that the global medical knowledge doubled at a speed of 50 years when we were in the 1950s. Today it doubles at the speed of 70 days. Okay, so you can imagine how this has pushed the speed of medical innovation. In the past, a medical startup was looking at competition existing competition. Now it's more concerned about the upcoming competition than the existing competition. Okay, the threat comes from what is already coming, not from what is already in the market. So, and then there is the regulatory problem. It's a problem because it's globally regulated, but with country-specific requirements. So we want to go in all the world. It's a global business. There is little sense of doing a startup that works only in Europe or only in China or only in the US. But the global environment is really a pain in the neck. It's expensive, unpredictable, and difficult. Yes?
Sorry, can you comment on the bullet number 2 a little bit more? Why
High social impact.
I guess I'm not sure if I understand that correctly, you know, why
You know, you don't understand because it's not well written. It has a high impact on social costs. If you talk to policymakers today, they will tell you that the reason why healthcare is becoming more and more expensive is because of medical innovation. There are new medicines that are more expensive, there are new technologies that are more expensive, there are new diagnostics that are more expensive.
But in my opinion, there's some medical innovations that are supposed to alleviate that problem,
Well,
right?
That's it's completely true. That this is health economics. But let's say that the starting point when you start to meet with a policymaker or with a potential buyer, a big stakeholder, is not that you're bringing savings opportunity. You're bringing, he or she thinks that you're bringing increasing costs. But then yes, of course. I mean, and also there is the time frame. So let's suppose that you have a therapy that helps patients to get better in 5 years. How many hospital managers are willing to buy your technology that is increasing their cost this year if the benefit for patients is coming in 5 years? Which insurance is going to do it? So let's say that there is a big cost impact and the blame is on us. But it's true what you're saying. So when we look at literature and we try to make sense of all the reasons, and now I'm talking only about med tech and health tech, all the reasons for failure, we look at all the authors, we always go down to 4, maximum 5 points. Wrong assumptions, wrong financial assumptions, so we basically run out of money when it's too early. Wrong commercial assumptions, so we basically thought that the price was reasonable and that somebody was willing to pay for it. Wrong environmental assumption. We got wrong the unmet medical needs. We didn't understand what were the needs. We thought that we knew and we didn't. And I'll make examples. Wrong team, wrong competencies. We hired very good business people, but nobody who knew the clinical aspect. Or we hired very good doctors, but nobody who could sell pen. Unmet, unfit, or unproven value proposition. The value proposition is very important, and many times we miss it. And we miss it because we don't test it. Okay, we make it up, we assume it's good, and then we have a surprise when we go to market. I'll be very specific on this. In my personal experience, why medical technology startup fail? Well, for many reasons. The first reason, there are a lot of assumptions and decisions that people wait too much to make, or wait too much to test. Which is, for example, is there anybody willing to pay 2,000 euros for a treatment that is giving me this type of medical advantage? Is there any insurance willing to reimburse? Is Medicare willing to create a code that reimburses this therapy? What is that the patient is looking for? Is it really to see something changing in his MRI, or does he really want to feel better, which is normally the second? Okay. The other thing is confusing innovation with invention with innovation. I see a lot of medical startups coming up with marginal improvements. Marginal improvements are normally not innovation. They don't change the way people deliver therapies or diagnostics. And you know what? Investors, they want to get 10 times or 20 times the money they gave us in a time frame that goes between 3 and 7 years. We are not going to be able to give back 15 times the money we received in 5 years if we come with something that is like an improvement of what already exists. So many companies think that they are, because they patented something that actually does better what is already available on the market, well, this is a startup that deserves a lot of millions and a lot of success. Other reasons, we forget that it's a global business. So many startups, they grow in a university and they test their assumption in the hospital of the university using 2 anesthesiologists that are friends of mine, the cousin of my wife, and they get, let's say, very comfortable with their assumptions because they tested them in their very local environment. As soon as they take a plane and they go on the other side of the world, they talk with the new doctors, they would hear a different story, but they don't hear the story for too long, and so they keep investing money. They keep going with the product throughout all the spending of development, proof of concept, testing, clinical trials, until they get the news. So, if you try to look at the common denominator to all of these causes, this is not execution. This is not bad engineering. This is not bad medical doctors who invent things that don't make sense. This is decision making. We spend so much time and money and efforts in making clinical-based decision making to make clinical trials that cost $10, $20 million to make one decision or to make one assumption. I assume that my treatment works better than the existing ones. So, when it's about a business decision, then we switch on our cigarettes, we put our arm out of the car windows, and on the way home, we decide what is the price for my innovation, in which country I'm going to launch it, who is going to buy it and why, what is my revenue stream for the next 10 years. This we decided colorfully. We are like artists. So basically, there is a big tension in clinical decisions, and then we're very relaxed in business decisions. As I said before, what do I mean that we are very relaxed? Sometimes we don't know the questions we need to answer. So sometimes I see doctors that they continue to make their research and to spend their money without really wondering if somebody one day will be able or willing to pay for this product. Well, did he know about the question being important? No, he just didn't know. I see engineers who know that the question exists, but they don't think it's so important, so they keep postponing and postponing and postponing it, and they get a slap on the face, or we get a slap on the face, if there is somebody who made mistakes, of course it's me, when they go to market. So it's about not knowing what decisions are important, postponing those who are important, and then even sometimes when we look at the decision that is actually important and necessary, we make it wrong. We take a biased decision. Why? Because instead of using the same fact-based approach that we use in clinical trial, we just trust somebody that is a commercial guy, he knows. Okay, so what is the solution? This solution is the result of many years of research, not mine. Okay, many years of research of an Italian university that about 8 years ago did a final big clinical trial. They took 700 startups on one side and 700 startups on the other side, and they imposed to the first 700 startup, early stage startup across the industry to use a scientific approach to any managerial decision making, not only to clinical, to any managerial business decision making. Well, what they found out is that the treatment group, those who received this treatment, they were actually much less likely to fail. There were companies that were pivoting faster, companies that were giving up if the business was not promising, companies that collected more money from investors, and companies that were more likely to get successfully to market, and more likely to be able to deliver the returns promised to the investors. So what we did was not something, let's say, very big. We just took this theory and we say, well, let's see if this applies to medical technology. Let's take 10 startups in one way and 10, we don't need to improve everything, but we need to see if it works in our world. And that's what we did. We started to methodically organize a group of startups that were treated in a way or in another. And the process of the treated startup is the one that you see here. We imposed to startups treated to map the entire list of assumptions and decision-making problems that a medical entrepreneur needs to face sooner or later, to make sure that these people had a checklist that at least in the evening they could go home and say, well, did they do this, did they check this, did they do like a checklist. We have thought a couple of ways to prioritize all these assumptions. So people have in front a big map of issues, visual maps, not a list, as I said before, visual maps, and they had a method to prioritize all the clusters of the map. And they could go home and say, well, this is very important, and we haven't faced this. And the third and most important piece was, well, how do we make a scientific decision, like the clinical decision, when we have to decide if my product will be adopted or not? I mean, what type of experiment do? We don't have to inject anything to anybody. How do I test assumptions like this? Okay, so we have used this for the treated startups, and the results were astonishing. The startups, the medical startups that were following the process have always stronger cash positions. They have greater likelihood of receiving investments, better market entry performance, which means that they started to penetrate the market immediately after market entry. And so we decided that, well, yes, it works also in medical technology. So what is it that we have? Now we have a process that is very simple that I want to share with you, even if there is no way that in this time I'm left, I would be able to share everything I want. Is there any question until now?
Yeah, I have a sort of a clarification of this question. You mentioned a lot of decision-making points that obviously the teams have to make and we all have to make these in the industry. But we are, as you mentioned way at the beginning, is that we are operating in a regulated environment.
Yes.
And the regulations, national regulations, domestic regulations, they require certain processes to be followed in terms of design controls. And as you probably know, we just got the newest QMSR 2 weeks ago that FDA released, that now QSR is obsolete and there's a new process and all that. So how do you tie in because that's I see, because I'm also in the industry, and I see that the decision making that always sometimes go the wrong direction is when people try to match and map up the technology, business, regulatory. How do they blend it all in? And that blend seems to be sometimes being biased to one direction versus biased to another direction. And that's where the mistakes happen. Yeah? So how does this whole scheme sort of fixes that, let's say?
Yeah, what you're saying is basically, yes, that it is extremely difficult to make decisions in this environment because on top of all the business issues, you have regulatory bodies that are complicating your life and limiting the amount of, or the types of solution you're finding. I don't have an answer for this. I mean, I wouldn't be here, I would be flying my own jet. You know, the point you're making is that it's extremely difficult, and I'm not claiming that with this method you will be happy and make happy regulatory, quality, business, and engineering. I'm just saying that you're less likely to make a mistake, a fundamental mistake. Yeah.
I have a question kind of along the same lines, but I want to spin it in the sense that how do investors look at the trade-off between towing the line between innovation and going too far in terms of regulation? Like, we have, as you know, class 1, class 2, and class 3 medical devices, right? Do investors favor a certain type of route, regulatory-wise, in terms of their outlook? Like, this is going to give us a certain amount of money in a certain amount of years, and it's a highly innovative product, but we have to go through things like clinical trials with a class 3 device. How do investors weigh that trade-off?
You mean the trade-off of having a risk that everything will fall off if you don't pass the clinical trials?
Yeah, yeah. How do they evaluate the riskiness of more innovative products?
Okay, so basically every investor has his own risk tolerance curve. Okay, and so most most investors, they use that curve. They basically, what they do, they look at the portfolio, and it's different. So there are different investors that would never take a pharmaceutical-like clinical and regulatory risk, and investors that would. So what they normally do, they look at their portfolio, and that's why you need to pick the good investor. They look at their portfolio, and if their risk investment stays within the average of their portfolio, then they are willing to do it. Otherwise, they won't. So it's really a decision they take ex ante. They really have risk tolerances that are defined, and they think within those terms. Different types of investors have different types of risk tolerance. In general, pharmaceutical and biopharmaceuticals are the ones that are more tolerating the risk in the preclinical areas. The medical technology, medical device, and health tech are those who are not. But unfortunately, the answer it depends by the investor. So, talking about investors, can we assume here in the room, just for today, that the main goal of a medical entrepreneur is to improve patients' life while predicting and delivering attractive returns to financial investors? Because I keep meeting a lot of people in love with their products and with their patients, but I never think that in order for this product, for this therapy to exist, they need an investor. No investor, no impact to patients. Now, if we agree with this, I know in North America it's easy to agree on this. In Southern Europe, it looks like, they look at you like David. If we look at this, let me go fast. What investors are looking at is how much money this company is going to make for me in the future. If the answer is a lot of money, then they invest. If the answer is, yeah, some money, but not enough to pay your risk, they don't invest. This is not an EKG, it's how the cash reserve of a typical startup go. They go up with an investment, when an investment comes in, then we start to spend in clinical trial and paying the people that work for us, and it goes down. Then another investment comes in, and it goes down until finally we generate some revenues, which are slowly going to be able to compensate our expenses, and then even making money. So I'll break even. Well, these are the points where normally we fail. When these points are too long, these bubbles are too extended in time or too deep, we need to close. So investors think about how much money is this company going to give me back, And what is the risk that I have of ending up in one of these three bubbles? So investors think in terms of cash. You know, for a clinician, this seems like a very bad thing. You know, he cares about the patients and their suffering, and here we're talking about cash. The reality is that no cash, no solution for patients. So how do we map? How do we map the issues that we need as entrepreneurs to cover for sure when we are managing a medical startup? Let's derive this from the definition of cash flow. You are engineers, so for you it's a very easy thing. So this is the definition you find in every book of post-market cash flow. So after I launch my medical device, I will approach a market that has a size, MS. I will penetrate this market with a certain percentage, MP percentage. And then I need to multiply this penetration for a price minus a cost of the number of products I'm going to sell. And I need to subtract some fixed cost. This is the simplest way to represent qualitatively the so-called post-market cash flow. So let's try to reverse engineer this formula and see what are the problems that we have. The first part, MS, which is market size, is there an attractive market? Are there enough patients for me to justify my entrepreneurial investment in this venture? Do they have unmet medical needs that are profound and strong so that my invention can make a difference? And this is the first part. The second part is percentage of penetration at a certain price. Is my product, my idea, going to be able to penetrate the market? Third, price, cost. At what cost? How and at what cost I will be able to penetrate the market? You see, if we reverse engineer what the investor has in mind, cash flow, we start to see what questions we need to answer before we even go to sit down with an investor. The first part, is there an attractive market, means another number of questions. So we can sub-explode all of these elements in sub-elements. So for example, is there a market means how many patients I have, how much society is already spending on this disease, how much insurances are already spending, how much people are willing to spend. Will the product penetrate the market? Well, another list of questions, is my product competitive? Is it competitive versus current standard of care? Is it competitive versus existing competition? Is it competitive versus emerging competition? Is my product really able to answer the unmet medical needs? How do I make this assumption? How do I prove it? How do I test it? So I'm not going to go into detail. Let's say that from, with the help of literature and med device executives, we have derived from the definition of cash flow a map, and we go to the end, that is built of 9 elements. Is there a market? Do I have a product? Does the value of my product fit the needs? Does the value of my product fit the needs better than other existing products? Are the stakeholders able and willing to accept this as a solution? Are there segments that can accept my product and are large enough at a certain price? Do I have a monetization model in mind that is successful? Do I have a commercialization model in mind that is successful? Once I know all of these things, will I know enough to make a financial prediction, a profit and loss statement predictions of the next year of my enterprise? Once I know my future cash flow, I know the value of my startup. From 1 to 9. Each one of these, and of course there is a more condensed way of looking at it, each one of these is a cluster of many other problems. So I can pick this and poof, explode it in 15 other assumptions and problems. Why is this helpful? Because the entrepreneur has under the eyes a checklist. And he can see, well, did I look at this, did I look at that, am I forgetting something? So for example, if we explode market attractiveness, then we divide it in two, market size and unmet needs. If we look at unmet needs, well, we need to look at two unmet needs, the needs of the patients and the need of the healthcare system, which includes insurances and other stakeholders. So then we go out and look at patients, and we see that patients have personal needs. Some are clinical and some are not clinical. Access, financial. And we as entrepreneurs, we need to be able to deconstruct all the needs, like engineers do, reverse engineering the definition of need. So this is the first part, the mapping. The mapping is not a mapping that we have taken out of a book. We have used significant literature. This is how the map explodes when you want to go at different levels, significant literature, and we basically use the definition of cash flow. Then we need to use, we said that once we have identified the problem we want to fix, we need to use a scientific method. It's called PSDA, which basically means it's a prioritized scientific method. What does it mean, a scientific method? And let's go directly to one example. Okay, here it becomes a little bit engineering-like, okay? We said, I have an idea, medical technology idea. And I sit down and I think, okay, what problems do I have to consider first? I know my map, I look at it, and I prioritize, and I take the first one or two. The question could be, will I invest the next 6 months in developing the new medical technology proof of concept I have in mind? Yes or no? And let's suppose that I want to take these decisions simply by saying, well, if my technology will be adopted, well then yes, it would be a good decision to go for it. But if I think that my technology won't have an adoption, well, maybe not. So in this super easy case that I'm oversimplifying just for the conversation, we have a decision that is not clinical, that is, well, now with what I know today, do I invest my next 6 months of time to work on this or not? And let's suppose that I make this decision only on the basis of my assumption of future adoption. You see, I have two actions. I go for it, or I exit. And I have two scenarios. Scenario of high adoption and scenario of low adoption. So I can go for it, invest time and money in delivering a POC, a proof of concept, and find highly acceptance from the market with high adoption. Or I can make an error type 1. So I invest money and time and the market is not receptive. Or I decide to exit. If the market later proved to be low adoption, it was a good decision, but if the market would have given me a high adoption, then I committed a type 2 act. Now, normally we take these decisions without even thinking about putting them in a chart. But what the scientific method is asking us to do is to simply do what we do in the lab and simply do what we do with patients for business decisions. Look, here we have two scenarios. One, high demand, basically high adoption. Two, low demand, basically low adoption. Two actions. Action 1, I go. Action 2, I don't go. Action 1, if I go and I find R adoption, I will make R million of dollars. If I go, I invest the money, I invest Z millions of dollars, and then I have zero adoption, then I make minus Z money. If I exit, well, I don't make any money. Which one do I pick? Which one do I pick? Do I go for the business development or not? do I pick action 1 and action action 0? Can you help me to choose?
Depends on the probability of both.
First, it depends certainly by the probability and by what else. How much R and Z are big, okay? Because the value of action 1 is R times P minus Z times 1 minus P.
But I can tell you that work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and they all at the beginning of the project think that Z is going to be small. At the beginning.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They're always not going to cost that much. We can do it quickly, and we can make a lot of money.
Absolutely. You know, and that's a very good point. Even using this method is not a guarantee of making the right decisions, because we can use wrong assumptions. The only good part of this method is that it really forces, if you lie, it forces you to lie many times. So it's not one lie enough. One lie is, no, we go for it because I know it's correct, because it's the right decision. This is the lie. But if you go through the process, you need to lie on Z, you need to lie on R, you need to lie on P. I'm saying lying to yourself, not to myself. No? So, what decision makers wants to predict is the future. What is the future scenario? What is the probability of the future scenario? Well, if we want to think like scientists, we need to make an hypothesis and test it. If we want to make a specific hypothesis, we sit down with our colleagues and we say, well, we believe, for example, that high adoption rate means that 25% of American hospitals will buy and will adopt my technology. So we set as a benchmark the number 25%. We call it V star. So at this point, our question is more simple, simplified and simple. We have two hypotheses. Adoption can be higher or lower than 25% or equal. Okay, so now we know that we want to go for action 1 only if adoption is above 25%. So we run an experiment. We survey a statistically significant number of potential customers. Of course, this is a super simplified case. But what it means is, I go in every hospital that is potential clients of mine, I speak with the surgeon, I speak with all the stakeholders, and then I find a quantitative way of summarizing their answer in a number. Okay? And if the number is, say, they have 70% or more probability to buy my product, I put them in the statistic as a positive number. I make an average and I look for 25%. So what I have is a distribution of answers from my clients. And let's suppose that the average of these answers is giving me 30%. So the sample I have collected is giving me 30%. Yeah, we have 30%, which is higher of our 25%, which means that, well, we could go for the project. Now, the only problem is that we all have done statistics 1. That's the problem. This is a distribution, this is not a value. So we also need to be able, by what probability, in all North America, not only the sample we've chosen, V is higher than 25%. So how meaningful is our example? So we need to find the probability P that the demand is higher than V star, 25%. We do exactly what clinicians do in a clinical trials. This is our sample. We have found that our mean value is V hat, is higher than our benchmark, so we are very happy. And now we need to see what is the probability P. And by the way, we need a benchmark for P. Because if we say the probability is 20%, well, we know it's not very good, but how much is good enough for P? Okay, so well, one way of calculating it is this. The value of action 1 we set as RP minus Z times 1 minus P. It has to be higher than value of action 0, which is 0. So this is an inequality that we can solve. Value 1 higher than 0. The result is that P must to be equal to Z minus R plus Z. So if we can put numbers there, and of course I agree with you that it's difficult to put numbers there, but if we can put numbers there, then we have also a reference for P. So we can say, hey, we have interviewed 33 hospitals in the US, and we have had evidence that 25% of US hospitals, 30% of US hospitals will buy my invention, and this has a probability higher than, let's say, higher than 40%. So here we say P is equal to Z minus R plus Z. So, for example, P is equal to P star, our benchmark is 40%. The probability is higher than our benchmark, 40%. Do we want to impress investors? Well, let's see and let's set the benchmark at 80%. So we go to investor and we say, now we have interviewed 60 hospitals, and with a probability of 80%, 30% of them will buy my invention. What do you think about this? You see that this is not only a way to make good decisions, it's a way to talk to investors. Investors want fact-based claims, like the clinical ones, not the clinical facts and then a lot of business colorful assumptions.
One thing though, I think, at least for the students who are listening to this, time is a very critical element in all this. Because you may do all these surveys and you may get all these results, but if your actions take, 2 years versus 1 year and the competition comes out and eats your lunch, then all of those calculations and the investors and all of that, it become sort of at risk, higher risk than what you thought at the beginning of the process. So the time is a big element of this.
This is absolutely true. And one thing I want to make sure is using a fact-based method to make a business decision doesn't mean to run a clinical trial every time. So it doesn't mean that we need to wait 2 years to have this type of answers. Because if this is the case, then I agree, but then we shouldn't do it. Using evidence-based decision-making as an entrepreneur of a medical startup or as an inventor of a medical product, it doesn't mean that I will stop every time and will make a clinical trial for 3 years just to say, yes, I will sell it. It's a mental state of mind. It teaches us to look for information to the from the market. It teaches us not to make decisions without having touched reality a significant amount of, a statistically significant amount of times. It's a way of working, it's a way of thinking. It's not necessarily that we need to run a clinical trial every time. Okay, so in this case, we find out that our V, experimental V, is 30% and P is 55%. They're both higher than the benchmark, and we go for it. Okay, so here I have an example. It's too long. It's an actual real example with statistical stuff. So for now, I will open for you to questions. But bottom line, we have found that startups, medical initiatives, startups that use this method are more likely to be successful, more likely to collect money from investors. Those who don't are more likely to fail. See if I can find the slide. Here it is. So what is this book about? I think it's good because contains the map. You can just browse. Contains examples of how the scientific method is being used to assess usability, for example. Oh yes, it's usable. Those 3 nurses, they're enthusiastic. Wow. Okay. And it explains how we got to these results. Company performances, faster generation of proof of concept, better market entry performance means they enter earlier with higher penetration rates, stronger cash position, greater likelihood of receiving investment from third parties, and above, I don't know where, is greater likelihood to pivot. Pivoting is not bad. Pivoting means that we realize that our idea needed to be adapted in order to maximize the returns and the probability of delivering something to patients. Too many pivoting is not good, but never thinking about modifying slightly the indications or the characteristics of our product, this is good. This is not good for sure. Okay, so we found that companies and startups that work on with a scientific philosophy, they are more likely to pivot because they actually see immediately they are not in the perfect direction. They need to move a little bit. Okay, so this was it for today. I hope somehow it could be helpful.
Does your, I don't know if you mentioned it today, but does your book also address the other sources of funding versus just investors versus angel funds or the government
No.
grants and?
The book is already big enough. It's 400 and something pages. There was, and by the way, it's not even my job. I'm not a broker of investors. I cannot do it. I'm not registered as a broker. I know many investors, but no, unfortunately no. So it's a book that teaches biomedical engineering students, medical doctors, entrepreneurs to think like investors and to give investors what they wait for.
Because a lot of, obviously, innovations and activities are not supported by the investors. They're supported by governments, they're supported by grants, they're supported by all those things, where the formula is a little bit different than.
Well, this opens, this opens a big chapter, how to deal with government derived grants. And I have the same problem in Europe. They think differently, but they start to think more like investors. Sorry, you said?
Sorry, can you show the QR code where we can download the PowerPoint presentation?
Okay, so there are a couple of QR codes. So the presentation, this one. This is where you find presentation. It's an online platform. You just register. It's free, and you can see the presentation. You can also write to me, and I will answer to you. No problem. You can call me. I am, by the way, I leave all my business card. There is also a couple of articles I wrote on the Forbes Council. This is one. It's called. This is one. When great science made good business decisions. It summarizes what we have said today. There is a second one, always on Forbes Council, which is this one, which says predicting success in medical technology innovation. It also summarizes what we have said today. Okay, so I don't know. I hope I was in some way able to inspire something.
So when you talk to investors and stakeholders, usually you like to project the performance of the product at the best form, right? At the projected highest peak performance.
Yeah, usually,
But
yes.
my prototypes may not be there yet because I'm still developing initial simpler prototypes. So how do you manage that to tell them that, yeah, that is only when I mature the technology and all the performance metrics to that level. Today I'm not there yet. So how do you convince them that it is
I understand very well, yeah. So you're saying you don't have a proof of concept
at the
yet.
highest level, but only at a very preliminary level?
At the highest level, well, you will have to be very clear in what is the risk that the level you are, of the TRL you are, the risk between the TRL, let's say 2 and the TRL 5 is. You will have to say, use basing your assumption on other projects or on literature. And you have, for example, 50%, like in pharmaceuticals, you have 50% to go from TRL 2 to TRL 4 because of the specific technology you are testing. And be very open with the investor. Say, if we are going to arrive on TRL 4 and we predict that this is 70% of probability, these are the returns. And be clear is the best, and honest is the best approach to investors, because they are not honest necessarily, but certainly they appreciate clarity and fact-based assumptions. Of course, what you have mentioned is very difficult to say. You always want to project the best revenues, and you don't even know if you will make it to have a TRL 4 or 5. Well, the best thing is to be honest and say, historically, we went, if 50 projects we did at FIU in my department, we went to TRL 2 and TRL 5. 70% of the cases we assume is this case for this project, so you can multiply the value of giving you by 70%.
Yes, Luigi, as we have students here, what can you say to our students,
Yes.
Mainly undergraduate, but some graduate, what should they glean from this, your discovery?
Yes. So let me be, I'm very happy that there are students here because I have a lot of things to tell you. First of all, you are more likely, statistically speaking, to find a job in a startup or in a young technology or medical technology company than in a big corporation. Number two, do you really want to go in a big corporation? Because I have been there and I escaped from there. Okay? So maybe in the 90s, the ratio between what you were giving, what you were asked, and what you were given back, the return on your personal investment was very good. Today it's not like this. And even the so-called stability of the job, it doesn't exist anymore. Companies, they have merger and acquisition, and they spin off divisions, and you lose your job at the speed of light. You don't even know why, and it's not your fault. So look for, hey, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Luigi. I was asked about this.
The best stability you can find is in your competencies. If you are good, not only as engineer, but as business person, and you are around people, okay? So you know about business, you know about engineering, you know about clinicians, about patients, and about business, and you keep up to speed, you will never be without a job, ever. Independently by the company you use, you will be working for, okay? So I strongly advise you to think it twice if your dream is to go and work for Medtronic. Any Medtronic, okay? I have plenty of friends of mine that just came out 5-10 years ago because they couldn't make it anymore. Okay, the difference between what you're studying today and what they will ask you to do is huge. And do you think you will be progressing in career because you're good engineers? Forget it. It's all about a number of what they call corporate skills that are not necessarily what you have studied for, and they are not necessarily what you want to follow. So I find that younger companies are innovative, and they are fun to work with. Anyway, coming back to your question, what do I think you need to know? Well, you need to start studying. You need to start to study business as soon as possible. The era where one can be only an engineer, or only a doctor, or only a business person. Hey, think about the business person I know. They don't know how a machine works, how an electrical engine performs, how a sensor is done. They're ridiculous today. Same as for engineers who don't know what a cash flow is. So make sure that you couple up other competencies, even academic competencies, with your engineering ones now. Because those are the competencies that will keep you alive, and you will always have a job. You need to be at the top of engineering, at the top of medicine, at the top of business. You need to be around and strong. That's it. It's not about the name of the company who will hire you. So what do I think, I hope I deliver to the students is learn the business language. Because even when I hired engineers, I never looked if they were good engineers. I gave for granted they were good engineers. The question is, does this guy understand what we're doing here? How the business works? how many patients we need to survive and to keep that division open instead of laying off everybody. So what I hope I deliver today is sound business language, which is what your next employer want to hear from you.
So there's this kind of exit strategy.
Thank you for coming.
For a lot of medical device startups that you kind of put out a product and you de-risk it enough to sell it off to, you know, a Medtronic or something like that. How favorably do investors look upon this exit strategy?
How favorably investors look at, sorry?
At this exit strategy, how favorably do they look at it? Is that something that investors want to do, or are they looking more to put a product out to market?
Okay, so I'm not sure I understood the question. So you think that if you have already an exit strategy, that's good for investor or not? Yes. So in the last cluster of the map, you see that there is something that is called time and exit value. Okay, so this is definitely what investors want to know. If you already have an exit strategy, well, they already know how they will make money when it's time to exit. Definitely, no startup has an exit strategy. Very few startups have one. It's normally the investor who finds the next investor and the exit strategy. So if you have a startup and you already have not only the previous 8 clusters done, but you have a strong idea, a fact-based idea about what your most likely exit strategy can be, of course it's more interesting for an investor, because you're basically pre-digesting in the soup.
Yeah, there's a question here.
Basically what, from your presentation, you said most engineers just in this line of work, they just make a product and just basically hope it works. But you've shown that the correct method is to actually go take some statistics, make a sample and all that. So my question is, what type of mindset will actually like lead a typical engineer to just make a product and just send it out and just hope for the best?
Okay, I don't understand the question. So
basically, like, what will make them assume that an investor will just go ahead and accept their product simply because it was made by an engineer instead of doing the proper research
Yes.
to be able to get it done properly?
yes.
So my question is like what line of thinking would lead to that?
To trust completely the engineer.
That's to make that type of error, that is.
Well, the line of thinking is very simple. Let me make a couple of examples. It's called relationship-based decisions. If you are an engineer and you have already developed 3 products that went well, the 4th investor will give you the money without looking at the 2 for your 4th product. This is called relationship decision making. That's what normally drives bad decisions in terms of giving trust to a product that doesn't have the papers in order. So all of this is good not only for entrepreneurs but also for investors, because they know the questions they need to ask. They know the tests, they know the assumptions need to be tested. So when you make one and you present one, you need to explain how you test it. I hope I did answer, I'm not sure.
Any other questions? I think his question is, if you make the product, and how do you make sure that it will get the traction down the line when we don't have enough support at the very early stage as the innovator?
Well,
And your answer may be that you do maximum verification tests to prove your product first.
yeah, so basically, there is competition in innovation, you know. And so you compete with all other startuppers, with all other researchers. I think that this is also helping you a lot to build your research portfolio by shrinking it to those applications that deliver value to patients. Not applications that are, let's say, marginal improvements, not applications that are interesting only for a limited amount of people, applications that really can change the way healthcare is delivered. That's your only best chance to be heard and to be followed and to be helped. Because the way Crash is always the same. You need to go in different fairs where your startup is invited to present the project, go in different incubators where your startup is put up in front of investors, call investors. But the reality is they will listen only at those who can show that they have a cash flow in front of them that is enormous. Only at those that are not marginal improvements of something, but are really changing how things are done. Let me make you, a classic example of something that didn't work. Then if I have time, of something that really worked. Knee braces that teaches Parkinson patients to walk again. They basically sense the positions of the knees, they're able to measure how we walk, and they project on the floor, and next to the light, the laser light, it says, well, this is where your left foot goes, this is where your, and with a sound, it tells you now, because you know that the Parkinson patients, they freeze. They need somebody telling them now, or somebody touch them. Spectacular invention. If you have these braces at home and you use them without going to a physiotherapist 20 miles from your house, you will learn to walk faster than going to the physiotherapist. So venture capital put $15 million. We do all the clinical trials. We see that the difference between physiotherapists and non-physiotherapists is not very big. And we found out something that we never thought of. Parkinson patients are feeling desperate. They are not in the mood of putting braces on for 40 minutes or 50 minutes a day. So what we call compliance of the patients in remote rehabilitation is very low. You know, compliance for pharmaceutical is if patients actually swallow the pills or not. In rehabilitations, patients that prefer to go with their wives to physiotherapists to take care of them for 45 minutes and then drive back. But they are not in the state of mind and in the discipline to put themselves in doing this type of rehabilitation. Bottom line, we sold a lot of those braces and nobody is used. And went bankrupt. But why? Nobody has ever tested compliance of patients. We always gave for granted that patients would have used it like candies. We never asked them. Or we asked only the two of those who told us the question we wanted to hear. And bottom line, then there was a business problem. These things cost $2,000. How many do you need to sell to support the company? There is a finite, fortunately, the population of Parkinson patients is very small, fortunately. So even if you take 30% of them, I mean, how many can they buy to keep your company alive? So you see, there were two things that were never tested.
Any other quick questions, so we can wrap up? I think we are. Any quick questions or closing? Yes, please.
I just remember you said in the beginning that it's better to start your products on a global scale rather than starting, let's say, in America, for example. So why is that the case?
Why it has to be global?
Yeah, why
Because first of all, because for investors, it's only global medical innovation that counts. Normally. Because it's basically, it means that if you make it American, you make it potentially like 30% as big as it could be if it is global. And so, this is one good reason. And also, I always say this because I'm originally from Europe. So in North America, it might be that sometimes it makes some sense to look at something that works only in North America. But if you look at Europe, I mean, do you think that any startup can survive in the German market? No. So in the moment that you go out to Germany, you go to France, you go to UK, you go to Russia, but you become global, you better start to come in the US as well. So investors are now interested in putting serious money in startups that are by definition local. That's the reason. That's why the business is, and it makes sense. I mean, unfortunately, diseases are the same everywhere in the world, and unfortunately, more or less patients suffer the same. So if you fix a problem at home, why you don't want to fix it in India? It's the same thing. Why you don't want to find a price in a delivery modality that works in another continent? That's also if you want the business beauty of this. When you find a solution, you haven't found a solution for the police of Miami. You found a solution that works for the world, for anybody who has that specific problem.
Thank you. I think one comment is the electronic textiles. I think there's the same issue that they thought seniors will use it a lot for health monitoring, but many seniors do not want to wear electronic textiles, so it did not catch up. Anyway, just a quick comment, but if no more comments, I think let's again thank the speaker, and it's being recorded live, so thanks to Michaela, our publicity and coordinator, and so you can always watch it on FIU BME channel, and also we will have more opportunities to invite Luigi in the future. So again, thank you very much, and also for all of you, the Industry Networking Day is on March 26th, and so please attend if you are in biomedical, or even if you are not in biomedical, you're always welcome to attend the industry session on March 26th. It will be here in this second floor, and I think the student chapters are already putting together speakers for that. If you have any suggestions, please let us know. So thank you all, and we look forward to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.